Starting off with number 10, the first thing we know is we know what CPU it's going to have. It's going to have an 8-core AMD CPU using 7nm Zen 2 microarchitecture. To most people that might sound like a bunch of words, and I totally feel you. Basically, it is based on AMD's 3rd gen Ryzen chip. So at the very least, with the way consoles are designed and manufactured, as of right now, that is a pretty up-to-date CPU. That can be very, very good for console gaming, especially if you couple it with the graphics. Over at number 9, well, we kind of know what they're using. The graphics are a variant of Radeon's Navi family GPU. The most interesting takeaway from this, besides the fact that it is AMD Radeon, is that it officially supports ray tracing. Now, for those of you that don't know, ray tracing is a new, more advanced type of lighting, and even high-end PCs right now with RTX, the idea of ray tracing and the realistic lighting is very, very graphically intensive. A lot of people have raised their eyebrows over this claim, seeing as how it's a challenge for a lot of PCs. How can a console do it? But if we're gonna go on what they're claiming here, that it does support ray tracing, maybe with some new technical wizardry, that can make for some really impressive looking video games. The demos and examples we have seen of ray tracing so far are really, really impressive. And since we are talking about the technical stuff, the chipset also includes 3D audio support, something that Mark Cerny did go a little bit more in depth with, saying how the PS3 to PS4, there wasn't really much of an upgrade in audio. He wants the PS4 to PS5 to be a notable jump if you're wearing headphones, and I really appreciate that approach. Moving over to number 8, since we are talking about chipsets, we do know that this upcoming PS5, or whatever it's called, will support 8K displays, which is absolutely insane. I'm already exhausted just thinking about it. I only got into 4K recently, but in terms of future-proofing, that is good. Now, we know that it's not necessarily going to produce 8K native resolution graphics, but the fact that it will scale up and support 8K, I think is good for future-proofing if we really do get to the point of 8K displays being that mainstream. Otherwise, expect a lot more, 4K support and stuff like that, since that's where we're moving. The question is there enough power in this thing to give us full native 4K resolution gaming with a smooth frame rate? That is, of course, the eternal question. I really hope that's where things are going, but we're just gonna have to wait and see. Moving over to number 7, an exciting confirmation. Cerny did say that the PS5 will be backwards compatible with PS4 stuff. Considering the architecture is going to be similar, PlayStation 4 games will be able to work on the next PlayStation, and I think that's fantastic news. They have to do stuff like this if they're gonna start bringing out consoles earlier and earlier. You don't want a bunch of games that you just bought a year or two ago to be completely outdated and unusable, do you? It's nice to see backwards compatibility kind of coming back and being a thing between PlayStation and Microsoft. It's not perfect, but I do think with this next PlayStation, this PS5, moving forward to actively support PS4 games, I think is a big deal, and generally a very good thing. But moving on over to number 6, since it is supporting PlayStation 4 stuff, Mark Cerny has confirmed that the current PSVR headset will be completely compatible with the PlayStation 5. Now, it's important to note that when pressed about, say, a sequel, a follow-up to the PSVR, which has been selling very well for a VR headset in the mainstream, Cerny was a bit more coy and just said that it is very important to them, and that is why the current PSVR will be supported on the console. The fact that it is compatible, though, what that does show is that Sony is still sticking with PSVR, and that's good to see. Now, moving on over to number 5 for something a little lighter, Death Stranding was brought up in this interview, and this is a little bit more speculation, but it does seem like it could be suggested that Death Stranding will be a cross-generational title, meaning something that squeezes out at the end of the PlayStation 4 generation, but will get a more improved version for PlayStation 5. According to the Wired article, a Sony spokesman did say that it's still coming out for PlayStation 4, but Cerny did smile and kind of pause a little bit, which makes you think that's all we're going on, really. Let's move on. At number 4, another big concrete confirmation is the fact that this PlayStation will stick to physical media. It will have a disc drive. It's not going all digital. I'm all for pushing technology to the next generation, but I think if it were to lose a disc drive and go only digital, it would alienate some players with worse internet connections. Thankfully for the PlayStation 5, that's not going to be a thing. And that especially goes in tandem with the fact that it is backwards compatible with PS4 games. I would like to assume that the disc drive will be completely up to date and be able to play 4K UHD Blu-rays. That's just wishful thinking though, as someone who still buys their movies physically. When asked about the future and game streaming and cloud services, Cerny did say, and I quote, "We are cloud gaming pioneers and our vision should become clear as we head towards launch." Thankfully, it doesn't seem like it's going to take over the concept of the console, but we don't know. But down to number 3, something huge, and I think one of the more big game changer things for this console, and a lot of consoles moving forward in next generations, is the fact that it will have a solid state hard drive. An SSD, for those of you that don't know, is flash-based memory that is much faster than a traditional spinning hard drive disk, and it's all the rage in PC gaming right now. It's ultra fast, it's smaller, it's low profile, it's absolutely awesome, and people have been begging for this to be in consoles since its inception. And now, while we don't know exactly what type of SSD, what tech specs, what design, what manufacturer is going to be in it, Cerny did make it a big point of his presentation to show drastically improved load times. He actually demonstrated Spider-Man PS4's load times, when you're fast traveling on a regular PS4, and then he used it on a PlayStation 5 dev kit, and it cut the load times down to a fraction of a second. It went from 15 seconds to 0.8 seconds. Not only are load times improved, but it also just drastically changes how quickly game worlds can be loaded into your game. Honestly, for developers now knowing that they're going to be working base level with an SSD, they can do a lot, and I think that overall this could change and improve gaming a little bit. I think developers can work with this in a lot of interesting ways that we may not have even seen yet. Like I said earlier, we don't have any tech specs for it, but in the interview, Cerny did claim, and I quote, that it has a raw bandwidth higher than any SSD available for PCs right now. That could be a game changer. For me, on this list, that's the most exciting thing, so keep your eye on that. Now, next at number 2, let's talk about pricing. This is something that actually wasn't featured in the piece, but thankfully the author, Peter Rubin, did go on Twitter to kind of show us what was left on the cutting room floor, and he shared this exchange between him and Cerny. He asked, "There's always been a general range of launch pricing. Will the next console hew to that range?" And Cerny replied with, "I believe that we will be able to release it at an SRP that will be appealing to gamers in light of its advanced feature set." Peter Rubin followed up saying, meaning that it may cost a bit more, but what you're getting is well worth it? And Cerny said, "That's all I can say." So what I do think is that he is setting the ground for that this will be an expensive console, a powerful one at that, justified by its raw power, at least that's what it seems like they're gambling on. But I also expect it to not be too outrageously high, considering the initial launch price of the PS3 was so high that it kind of put a damper on the launch. I don't know if they would make that mistake again, I really hope not, but it could come close. Now finally at number 1, one thing that Mark Cerny did confirm is that it's not coming in 2019. Now things have been suggested before, we've kind of gotten murmurs of this, but 2019 will not be the year for the PS5, thank goodness. I can definitely still wait a little while, I don't know about you guys, but he did also say that a number of developer studios are already working with development kits, meaning they're making and developing games for this next-gen PlayStation console. So developers are apparently getting plenty of time to be able to work with the settings this thing is going to have, and that's exciting. So while it's not releasing for 2019, it does seem like things are well on their way. If you follow gaming, you know this stuff is just really exciting to follow, and I'm very curious to see what else Sony does. All of this stuff, again, is just little bits of information that we'll happily feast on, but it's probably going to be a little while until we hear more. But